everybody, welcome back. If you got the opportunity to check out our latest video, you saw that we spoke about fire mitigation. Well, this week we're going to continue the series and dive a little bit more in depth on the topic insurance. Lately, we've been getting a lot more calls from homeowners who received a letter from their insurance company and don't know what to do next. It's usually not just a simple question either. There's a lot sitting behind it. The letter mentions a deadline, a possible change to their coverage, and concerns about trees or vegetation on the property. And in that moment, everything shifts. The trees that have always been a part of your home suddenly feel like a liability. The shade, the privacy, the way your yard feels in the morning or late in the day. All of that gets replaced with this pressure to act quickly and fix the problem before something bigger happens. Most people read those letters and assume the safest option is to remove everything, clear the space, eliminate the risk, and make sure there's nothing left that could come back to cause an issue. And honestly, that reaction makes sense. Your home and your insurance are on the line, and you want something that feels certain. But in most cases, that's not actually what's being asked. The goal isn't to erase your landscape. The goal is to reduce risk. And there's a big difference between removing everything and understanding what actually needs to change. The difference is where a lot of long-term problems either start or get avoided.
So as you know, in Arizona, we're in a dry, arid climate. Since the LA fires, insurance companies have really been hounding people that are backed up to a forest land. In HOAs and POAs, things like that, it's not nearly the same as far as the way that they're evaluating the risk. But like in Sedona area or the village of Oak Creek, sometimes in Camp Verde or anywhere really that backs up to forest land, they're really starting to evaluate those differently. They don't really care about how nice your yard looks or how recently it's been trimmed. They care about spacing. They're thinking about proximity, like how far away from the house is the vegetation. They're also looking at density. How dense is that vegetation? Is it spaced out enough that now continuity isn't an issue? Meaning that it has a clear path to travel. So they're looking at those three things. So their scope doesn't really matter to them as much as it might to us, as far as like our shade, our beautiful trees. Their scope is how is your property being managed for fire safety. And especially in Arizona, we went through a weird season from winter. Now it's already hot and dry. We've been seeing a lot of homeowners that either are getting that letter and now they're they're up for renewal, but they now have these really strict terms, or some new homeowners can't even get insurance at all. Or if they're trying to get insurance, now the premiums are so high and they have to do all these different things with their vegetation.
And that's where it starts to feel confusing for homeowners, because you're standing in your yard, looking around, and nothing feels wrong. Everything looks normal. The trees are the same trees that have always been there. But that's not how they're evaluating it. They're not looking at how it feels to live there. They're looking at what could happen if something goes wrong. So now you have this gap between what you see every day and what someone else is seeing on paper. And that gap is what creates a lot of pressure to make fast decisions just to get it handled and move on.
So when we break this down a little more, it reveals that things are actually pretty consistent. They're looking at proximity. How close is the vegetation to your house? Are there overhanging branches? Also, what matters is not just fire, but also wind. Right now, they're targeting fire a lot because of the LA fires, and we're in a very dry climate, but they're also looking at things overhanging, wind damage. If we did get a freak snow, which obviously in the summer we wouldn't, but a few years back we got snow and it destroyed a lot of trees and insurance rates went up. They're also looking at density. How dense is that vegetation near your home? We went over that, like how the spaced, but packed vegetation equals continuous fueling. Fire moves easier when it has more fuel. It's pretty simple. Another thing that they look for is continuity. So what's the pathway of that fire? Once it has the fuel, where's that fire going to go? So if you have dense foliage or vegetation in a close proximity to your home, the continuity of that fire is going to go right to your home. And that's pretty normal. A lot of our homes, we like to have vegetation pretty close to our homes. But that's a lot of what we're seeing right now is the way that they're looking at it is they don't really care about what you think about your yard. They care about proximity, density, and continuity. How dense is that vegetation? How close is it? And when the fire happens, if the fire happens, where's it going to travel and how is it going to travel? So then we look deeper and we look at like deadwood, we look at branch structure, we look at the unions. Are these trees actually healthy? And that can help us and you make informed decisions instead of feeling like you got the dreaded letter and you don't know what to do. So we're here to just kind of try to help you understand the lens that they're seeing it through. Where we really start to see problems is what happens after you get the letter, because now you have a pressure response. You have a deadline. Fear of losing your coverage and the liability that you're now more aware of and the urgency of it. And so that can be scary. And the big mistake that people make is they move too fast. So they'll hire anybody that will take the job and they'll, like Serena mentioned, think that they just need to gut the property. And that's really not the case at all. If you think about what I was talking about, proximity, density, and continuity, it's not about gutting the property. It's about being strategic about the vegetation and the health of that vegetation. Because healthy trees, yeah, they're flammable, but they're not nearly the same as a tree with a lot of dead wood in it or a lot of low laying fuels, which would fuel that continuity. And since we like having, especially in Arizona, trees and vegetation immediately around our homes, that's what they're looking at. And so they seem to look at our vegetation and our trees as objects. And we as homeowners don't. These are living things, especially as arborists, we understand that. We have prized possessions in our trees, and every spring, we'll plant flowers or whatever it may be. And that means a lot to us, but for them, it doesn't. For them, it's very objective, and they're looking at it as a system. And so if we can kind of understand that system and educate ourselves, then we can kind of play their game with them and keep ourselves safe while abiding by their rules and still enjoy our properties. So when we think about it as arborists and we want to educate you, we think about the canopy and what that's doing for the tree. That canopy is important. It's shading the trunk, it's managing balance, and it's controlling temperature. That's important for a tree. It's a living system. So when we think about continuity, density, proximity, things like that the insurance is looking at from an arborist lens, it's really important to understand how that tree is going to act if it did catch on fire or if a big gust of wind came. That being said, a lot of times with these urgencies, we tend to over prune. And so now the tree has to compartmentalize all those wounds. So it's pulling energy from the root system and from its stored energy and trying to fix all the problems that you've just created. And now you don't have enough energy or leaves left to photosynthesize and reproduce that energy. You've also opened up the trunk to sun exposure that it's not used to. And in some trees, depending on the species, immediate sun exposure can dry out that bark and crack it. And now you've just created a bigger problem because now that bark's way more flammable. There's a lot of things to think about when you get this letter and when you need to approach these trees. Not only fire, when you prune, the wind changes through those trees also. And so sometimes you'll see a long branch with just a little bit of foliage right at the end. That's called a lion's tail. That's really bad for the sun, and the wind now passes through that tree a lot differently than it would have before. So it puts stress on the unions in a different way. And so if there was something overhanging your house and you thought that you were getting rid of a lot of fuel by taking all the branches out of the middle and leaving the foliage on the end, well, maybe you did, but now you've just created a kite for the wind, and it's going to put a lot of stress on that union. Also, it's going to be exposed to the sun, which is going to put a lot of stress on that branch, which in turn is going to put a lot of stress on the tree itself. So we don't want to jump into urgency and start over pruning or taking things out that don't need to be taken out. It's really just about understanding the sequentials of looking at it through an objective lens, but also looking at it through an arborist lens and a homeowner's lens, because aesthetically it's important for you, this is your home, to be able to enjoy it, but you need to understand it, especially if you're being asked to do a lot of really expensive tree work, and then you also have to now pay a higher premium. It's just important for you to understand it.
And that's the part that Ty explained most people aren't told when they're trying to solve this quickly. It's not just about what you remove today, it's about what the tree becomes after the work is done. Because now you've taken something that might have been manageable and changed how it functions. And that change doesn't always show up right away, it builds over time. That's why it isn't just about checking a box for insurance. It's about making sure you're not creating a bigger issue a few years from now.
So insurance companies are looking at this as a sequence of events happening. If a fire happened, or maybe not even just fire, but wind, we look at it as a system, and no tree is the same, even if it's the same species. So from an arboricultural standpoint, we look at the tree that we're looking at, the one tree, and we look at what that tree needs, the overall health and the condition of it. But we then think about, what would an insurance adjuster look at and see in this tree? So between those two things, we can kind of, well, we'll attempt at least to find a happy medium for you as the homeowner, so that you don't have to get rid of the tree altogether. We can keep the tree safe for you. On the other side of that, there are trees that do need to be removed. There's just no way around it, especially when you talk about proximity. If there's a big tree that's a more flammable tree, or has a drier style bark, and it's within probably 10 feet, it depends on the company, it probably needs to be removed. I'll give you an example. One company said that anything within 10 feet has to be pruned 10 feet up off the ground. Well, if the tree is only 15 feet tall and we prune it 10 feet up off the ground, then there's not much tree left. And so aesthetically, it doesn't look good. It's really bad for the tree, and it just qualifies as a removal in general. Arboriculturally, there are certain ethics that we uphold, and a strong one is to not do that to a tree. It's called a lollipop or a lion's tail, for multiple reasons. Another thing that is really important is when we come in, we don't just listen to what you want, and we don't just look at the letter of what they want. We understand what the tree needs, and we can mesh what you want with what they want. And since we understand the biology of it, we can do some selective pruning to meet their requirements, but also so it's aesthetically pleasing for you. So there's a lot of options here. It's not a one and done thing. It's not hire anybody who will take the job and get it done as quick as you can. It's important for you and for the longevity of your property to get it done right, and by somebody that understands it, not just so that you'll either get your renewal or you'll get insurance, but so that far after that, you'll be able to enjoy your landscape for longer. So I wanted to give you a visual representation of what we're talking about today. It's pretty simple. I'm going to go through it pretty quick, but I think this would help. So the core here is that insurance companies look at risk. They don't look at aesthetics. They don't care about how you've built your house around these trees. They look at red flags. So some of their red flags are overhanging limbs, things that are too close to the house, understory, and continuous fuels. So I've broken this down into sections. So your 0 to 10 feet would be clear. Keep that clear. 10 to 30 feet, reduce. 30 to 100 would be thin. Your 30 to 100 is really your control. So if a wildfire was coming through, you want to break that up and slow it way down well before it even gets to your house. So you're breaking the continuity. So when we think about like density, ladder fuels, and all these canopies touching, if this was the wind and here's your fire coming through, well, all this understory right here is going to push all that fire up into these canopies, especially if we think back about what we were talking about earlier about how we prune these trees. If there's dead wood or if these are unmanaged trees, these are going to catch fire easily, and it's going to spread because this is so dense. So again, we just want to break up that continuity and that connection, not just remove everything. So it's strategic. Over here, it's the same thing, but here we have removed some trees because that is necessary. And now you can see that the wind can kind of pass through a little easier, not so dense. And in your 0 to 10, there really isn't much going on in there. It's okay to have a few shrubs, and even like right on the outlier, you have some trees. That's great. And then in your 10 to 30, you just reduce. So that's way more reduced compared to this. And then your 30 to 10, or 100, I'm sorry, would be your control. And I didn't draw all these trees, but I think you get the idea. So you space them out, you prune them correctly, and then you open up the canopies a little bit more. You want wind to pass through the canopies. You basically just don't want it to be so dense that if it was to catch fire, that it would concentrate that fire. And so I think that hopefully this would help you seeing a high risk situation versus a managed situation, because I know those letters can be confusing and scary, and it's really easy to act out of urgency without really understanding it. So just control fire before it reaches the home. That's the most important thing. That's what they're going to look at. And then structure and spacing determines the risk. That's it, bottom line.
These trees are a part of your home, and in a lot of cases, they can stay. With the right approach, you can meet insurance requirements while still protecting your landscape and avoiding bigger problems down the road. We've always believed that good tree care starts with understanding, and right now, that understanding matters more than ever. If you received one of these letters or you're not sure what your property actually needs, you can always reach out to us. We're happy to walk it with you and help you understand what's going on and what your options really are. And if you found this helpful, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll keep putting out more educational videos like this so you can better understand your trees and your property. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor. Climate High Tree Experts, professional tree care backed by science.